From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This with Kathy Wyatt, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Here we have two different types of bread. This one is made with whole grains, and this is made with more of the refined ingredients, and it has some additives and preservatives. Here, when we look at them, you can see the color difference immediately. This one is more yellow. It does have some coloring added, and we do have more holes and texture within this. But when we have the higher fiber product, more of the whole grains, there's more substance to it, and it takes it longer to break down, because the longer that our body has to break down the food, the less of those blood sugar spikes and crashes we get. So here we have the two yogurts. One is much thicker, much creamier, and there's a tartness to it. And with Greek yogurt, it does have the added benefits of being low sugar, high protein. Here is another yogurt. You can see instantly the texture is completely different. The sweetness will also tell you that there's added sugar to it. The mouthfeel is so different that it almost seems like there's something missing. That is not how yogurt is supposed to taste.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 27th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, ultra-processed foods. Joining us to talk more about it are Heather Miller and Megan Hall. Both are registered dietitians and licensed medical nutrition therapists with Hy-Vee in Omaha. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Heather, I want to start with you. What is considered a healthy diet these days?
All right. Well, a healthy diet is, we kind of go back to the basics, right? So it's kind of subjective. Some people have different interpretations of what a healthy diet is, but what we dietitians think of is a healthy, balanced diet, meaning you're getting foods from all the food groups, lots of fruits and vegetables, lean proteins or plant proteins, moderate amounts of those grains, low-fat dairy, and some healthy fats in there as well. And we also want our foods to come in its most basic form whenever possible, so the least processed is the best, because that's going to have the most nutrition in it.
What percentage of Americans would you say are eating healthy as defined by you?
Well, again, everybody's definition of healthy is a little subjective, but the statistic I saw was that when surveyed, about 50% of adults say or report that they are trying to at least eat a healthy diet in whatever that means to them.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And Megan, for those who aren't, what seem to be the biggest barriers?
You know, I think we have a lot. We can't pinpoint it on one thing. I think time is a huge barrier for a lot of folks. We just are very overscheduled, and so eating is at the bottom of that totem pole in the time. I think stress is a huge factor. We've been living in a very stressful environment for, a long time, especially the last several years. And then I think just the overabundance of accessibility to those quick, easy things that maybe aren't as high in nutritional value is another barrier to eating that healthy diet that we hope more people are leaning into.
Well, if we keep up at that pace and we aren't maybe necessarily doing the best things, right? What can tend to happen?
Our diet plays a huge role in our overall health picture. Again, it's not the only thing that makes a difference in our health outlook, but it's a big part of it. And so if we're not focusing on getting more of those nutritious, more balanced foods in the diet, it can lead to a greater risk for disease or exacerbation of disease states that we already have, concerns with diabetes, heart disease, blood pressure control, potentially obesity and cancer. So there's a lot of things that can be affected when we're not paying attention or focusing on better quality foods in our diet.
All right, so we're going to segue into ultra-processed foods now, Heather. As we put up a definition for our viewers, tell me, how do you explain it to people?
Yeah, this is somewhat of a new term, I think, in the nutrition scene. Ultra-processed, typically, I think to most people, describes foods that are have ingredients that aren't found in your kitchen, maybe you can't pronounce. So additives, preservatives, fillers, and are typically associated with being higher in sodium and sugar as well. So they're foods that have been transformed quite a bit. They've gone through several different transformations to get to what they are in their final packaged form.
All right, so how are ultra-processed foods and processed foods different?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. Most foods that we have in the store today are processed in some form, and it's not always a bad thing. So if you think about it, it's really just a transformation. So whole grains, for example, to make a whole grain bread, you have to process the flour. Whole wheat flour has to be processed in order to be made into bread. Otherwise, it's just a kernel and it's inedible. So broccoli florets, frozen broccoli florets, have to be processed in order to clean them, cut them, individually quick freeze them, and put them in a bag so that they can be delivered to the shelves. Milk has to be pasteurized to make it safe for consumption. So there's a certain amount of processing that really has to go into a lot of foods. So when you describe processed foods, it's really kind of anything in that packaged form that's not in its initial fresh from the field form.
Okay.
So the ultra processed is where it kind of starts to take a different shape, and we're adding extra ingredients and things like that for texture and flavor and preservatives and things.
Well, let's put up a photo of those different shapes that you just alluded to. And just give us a few examples as we're looking at this photo, ladies, of ultra-processed foods. And you can identify some of those on the screen if you want, if those are maybe your favorites, but give us a sense of what we're dealing with here.
You know, I think when we think of those ultra-processed, we're thinking of the packaged stuff. Sodas, packaged chips, even maybe packaged popcorn potentially, even like rice packages or noodle packages that you add water to it to cook it to be eaten then as maybe a side or part of your meal. Those would all technically be considered ultra-processed foods.
Okay, now I read that 70% of the food in the United States is ultra-processed. What should that number be, Megan?
You know, I think it's hard to put like this definitive, we should only eat this much ultra-processed food, because I think a lot of people would then say, oh, I get to eat this much ultra-processed food, right? Like that would be maybe a goal. Like we don't always say we should have this much added sugar in the diet, so we don't aim to hit that marker, right? But I think it's just a reduction. How can we work to reduce it? As dietitians, we're working with clients, customers, patients, and even if we can see a 5 to 10% improvement in total body weight or reduction in that total body weight, we see better health outcomes. So I even think that little bit, 5 to 10% change of a reduction in that would be a huge change for people. It's these little changes that can add up to a bigger change and put us into healthier eating habits.
All right, before I ask this next question, I think it's probably important maybe to drill down a little bit in terms of what calories truly are. I mean, how much weight, no pun intended, do we give calories? So, Heather, when somebody says to you, well, how important is that I should know about it, and you know, that kind of thing, what are you telling people about calories in general?
So for calories, we want to eat enough to maintain all of our daily activities, but we don't want to overindulge. So we as dietitians can do calculations and estimates of how many calories somebody should be taking in a day based on a number of different factors, and try to pinpoint that for people, and we can always adjust as needed along the way. But you want to eat within a certain range to try and maintain where you're at. If your goal is weight loss, then we try to adjust that. It's hard to say at any given number for, you know, just generally. It really depends on your individual situation.
When we're talking about ultra-processed foods, and we say 70% in the United States in terms of food is ultra-processed, then caloric intake would have to come into play. So what percentage, Megan, approximately, of calories that we are consuming on a regular basis would be then ultra-processed? Is it 70%, or is it?
I would say so. I would say if 70% of the amount of food that we're eating is in that ultra-processed category, then that's probably making up 70% of our daily intake. The challenge that we face as dietitians, or that anybody really faces, is calories are just, again, another portion of the whole picture, and ultra-processed foods do tend to carry more calorie density, so they have a heavier weight on the calorie side without as much nutritional value to it, and they also come in smaller portions at a higher calorie level. So maybe we don't feel like we're eating a lot of food in terms of like what's the amount on the plate visually, but the density of that calories. And that's again a challenge for individuals, is they don't always see the volume of their food translating to the same as the calories in their food. And you can eat a lot of nutritious food at a lower calorie level than you can these ultra-processed foods.
Wow, let's talk about kids for a minute. I don't know how often you deal with kids, maybe more adults, I'm not sure. But do we find that the stats and what we're talking about today really is applicable to the kids? And is it better? Is it worse? I mean, what are we talking, Megan, with kids?
You know, I think it is a little bit higher with kids, maybe roughly similar. I think kids are eating how their parents are eating, or maybe parents are eating how their kids are eating. It kind of is this give and take, right? But kids aren't always going to the store and buying the food. Somebody has to be purchasing it. Most kids aren't always the ones that are doing that. So I would say it's probably pretty similar. We've all grown up eating a specific way from how our parents fed us. That dictates then as us as adults how we eat too. Those patterns lie in there. And so these kids will most likely be continuing on, unfortunately, in this same pattern unless we do get more education out there to making better habits.
Heather, anything to add to that?
The only thing I was thinking was that, you know, if your diet consists of a majority of ultra-processed foods, to Megan's point, what you're probably missing is a lot of good nutrition that you're not getting from the less processed foods that we'd rather have you eat, because your body craves nutrition. It needs nutrition to function optimally, to control inflammation, to keep your gut bacteria working for you. We know a lot of disease starts in the gut. And so if you're not getting a lot of good nutrition, and because you're eating a lot of the ultra-processed foods, you're probably missing out on a lot of those good nutrition and good nutrients that prevent disease and prevent inflammation.
Okay, let's talk about the risks here for a few minutes. We're going to put another graphic up for our viewers, and as we're doing that, I mean, you know, we can do this, but only to a certain degree, right? What types of risks are involved? And I'll ask you both to just look at this graphic. And Heather, why don't we start with you? Weigh in on this.
Yeah, so we know, and we've known for a while that, you know, consumption of, you know, the diet quality definitely has an impact on disease. We've known that for a while, and it seems like more and more studies are coming out, like the one that you're citing, that seem to continue to confirm that. There also, though, are a number of other factors that go into health overall. Stress, sleep, hydration, familial factors, and genetics. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but nutrition is one of the biggest factors, and it's one of the most controllable factors. So it's a good first place to start. And then we also need to look at all those other lifestyle factors that come into play, because regardless of what study it is, it does seem to correlate ultra-processed foods with disease states, and we know that by changing the diet we can help diminish or reduce the risk of those outcomes, those negative health outcomes. So, but when we look at people, we want to look at the whole picture and make sure that they're also, you know, living a healthy lifestyle. What do their habits look like? Are they getting enough sleep? Because those can all come into play into your health as well.
Megan, as you're talking with people, and thank you for that, Heather, as you're talking with folks and you are identifying the possible risks, and people say, you know, so what? They're living for now, right? They're not looking ahead. How do you convince someone that today is the best day that anybody can just start and try to maybe change things a little bit? How do you look into the future, help them look into the future to really motivate them to start?
You know, as dietitians, we are a therapist in a sense. We practice medical nutrition therapy, and so we work to find what is that motivation for them. And everybody is a little bit different, and I'm a big believer in we as individuals have to be the one willing to make that change. And so I think it's helping them see that side of things, that little thing. I think sometimes we as people, as individuals, feel that any kind of change is virtually impossible. And so as registered dietitians, we are able to show them that even just these tiny little changes can make a big difference, and we can build on that momentum. We shouldn't live in absolutes, the all or nothing, because we typically end up as nothing at that point, right? So how can we help them find these little bit of motivational changes? Or what is one thing I always ask the clients that I'm working with, what is one thing that you feel you could change right now? And maybe what's one thing down the road that you would like to change, but you just don't feel like it's something you can do at this moment. And we start with those smaller changes and then show them, now look at all these things that you've done. Now we can tackle this big change. So it really is that motivational interviewing kind of piece to see where they are. We said this a lot. We meet the individual where they're at. It's not where we're at, it's where they're at to help them see those positive changes happen.
I'm feeling better already. I just want the two of you to know, because I ran across this graphic, and we are going to put this up for our viewers right now. It was, I don't know, said something like, things you should never eat, right? And I thought, wow, never seems a bit extreme. So what I'm hearing you say is you don't need to let it go altogether, that maybe in moderation would be okay, Megan? Is that what you're saying?
Definitely.
Yeah, and Heather, what do you think?
Yeah, so we look at the list too, and we're kind of like chuckling. I mean, because there's a lot of lists out there of stuff you shouldn't eat and should eat. Yes, moderation is key, and moderation to me means I don't eat it every day, kind of thing. And we look at how can we reduce, start with moderation and get to that point, and then how can we reduce from there.
Okay, which sets us up really well for this next question. What, Heather, is the right way to eat?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
And we're sure you're going to answer it for us right now. You're going to give us all the solutions.
Well, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but it really is just going back to those nutrition basics. Healthy, balanced diet, fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, low-fat dairy, and whole grains. And I feel like we preach this mantra all the time. But I do think there's a little room for things like ultra-processed foods, again, in moderation, with the goal of incrementally reducing that over time. So it's really just kind of, getting back to those less processed foods, trying to replace some of the ultra processed with something that's a little bit better choice. And we just work on that over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned meeting the individual where they are, and I love that. So let's go to a day in your life and someone comes to you at the counter, or maybe you're in the aisles or wherever it is that you are, and they say, I heard that you work here and you're a registered dietitian. I need your help. How do you start that conversation with someone you've never met, who's maybe gotten to this moment that was so difficult, and it took them so much courage to just come to you, to be able to be so self-aware and admit, I may need some help here? How do you even start that?
I think it goes to, why do you want to make these changes, or what is prompting this, or what, again, I like to start with the kind of taking that big picture out. I think a lot of people, I hear this a lot. I know I need to just eat better. I just need to do it. I know how to eat. I just need to do it. But realistically, most of the time we do need a partner in this. And eating is simple in some ways and very challenging in other ways. So that's where working again with a registered dietitian can be helpful. As retail dietitians, we are there on the ground where we're buying our food. Good, bad, and maybe a little bit of ugly sometimes, right? And so it's helpful for us to help them have that tangible way to navigate the aisles and pick, wiser choices within the aisles. But, what again is that motivating factor for you? Why now do you want to make this change, or what is prompting this? And then I think that always helps then to open the doors a little bit more of those open-ended questions to, okay, well, let's start with something small. Again, what do you think you can make as a change now? And then going and working forward with that.
Okay, so you're at work and I come in to the store, right? I'm going to be in a hurry. I'm going to have 10 million things that I need to be doing, and I'm not really going to be thinking through, and I might be hungry, right, as I'm racing through the aisles. So give us some good advice, even if it's before we get to the store, about how to approach, right, that space, and what we can be doing that would be in our best interest and help even the choices that we're making in the time that we have. What would be of greatest help? Heather, you're kind of nodding. You want to start?
Well, sure. I think when you're going to the grocery store, it's good to have a plan and a list. I don't know about you, but when I go in without one, and especially if I'm hungry, it just goes, my grocery bill grows a lot. So I always try to make sure I'm not hungry when I go to the grocery store, and then have that list so that I stick with it. Actually, shopping online has helped a lot with that as well, at least for me. I don't tend to buy all the extras. I just buy what's on my list, and I either go pick it up or have it delivered. So that I think is helpful. And staying, around the perimeter of the grocery store is a good idea. The shopping from those areas tend to be, those are the refrigerated sections where your fresh foods are going to be, or more whole foods. And so that's where I'd recommend starting, and then being very selective about where you're going in the interior of the store and the aisles. Canned food, there are certain places, and we can take people to those sections and show them the right, the better choices in those sections. But those are kind of my general tips.
Megan, what about you?
Same thing. Always have a plan. Never go in hungry, and maybe also don't go in emotional, right? Emotional can be very impactful and lead us to maybe making some choices that we wouldn't have if we were in like a better state of mind. And I agree, the perimeter is a great place to start. We shouldn't be afraid to venture into the aisles, but also knowing how to read a food label when you're at the store is hugely impactful, and reading that label for your specific health. A diabetic may need to focus on some items on a food label more so than somebody that has high blood pressure may need to focus on sodium, or a diabetic may need to focus on the carbohydrate content. So just knowing how to read that food label, I think, is huge. If there was 2 things on a food label I tell everybody to pay attention to: how many servings are in a package and what a serving size is. Because one container could be a serving size, or one container could be 12 servings. So it's just really being cautious and mindful of those things as well.
Wow, hugely helpful. All right, I'm going to change gears a bit, and now we're going to go to the restaurant, right? And you talked about learning and understanding labels. The same thing would apply with menus, right? So Heather, I'll start with you. When we're going to our favorite restaurant, what should we be most aware of?
Yeah. It's actually, once you know kind of what to look for, you can find healthy choices in pretty much any restaurant. Some are more difficult than others, but what I tell people to look for is, whole proteins that aren't breaded. Salads are always a good option. Looking for cheeses that are more natural, and avoiding the cheese sauces and the American cheese. You can find these things, adding sides of fresh vegetables, or a side salad, or a piece of fresh fruit. So skipping the chips and the French fries, and opting for those healthier sides instead. I really like going to Mexican restaurants, and I just love getting a big plate of fajitas that has the peppers and the onions all mixed in, and then you can get like a side of beans, and skip the tortillas and the rice, and maybe just have some tortilla chips and salsa instead. And I think that's a good, healthy meal that anybody can have. So
I hope our viewers heard that. You said that. We're going to quote you on that. Megan, what about you at the restaurant?
It's very funny. We both read this question as what is our favorite restaurant to go to, and I think
okay.
As dietitians, a lot of people, I don't think, realize that we're foodies at heart too. Maybe not always foodies in like the cooking chef side of things, but foodies, and we enjoy dining out just as much as the next person does. And I agree with Heather on all the points she makes. You can always make swaps to add those healthier things to build a more balanced plate. And I am another big fan of going in with a plan. If I'm going to a new restaurant, I always look at the menu ahead of time, because typically when we're dining out, we're meeting other people that maybe we haven't seen for a while, we're talking, we're gabbing, and then all of a sudden we have to make a decision, and then we're kind of like a deer in headlights, and maybe we just make a decision and then we regret it later. And so just kind of having a moment to scan the menu before you even get there gives you just kind of what you're going up against, and helps you navigate it that way too. Just like going a plan to the grocery store, going a plan with, to the restaurant, and always making swaps on those sides or getting, you know, just a good quality protein. Dining out should be a fun experience. Eating should be a fun and enjoyable experience, but it can also be very nutritious at the same time.
Heather, do you find that when you go to restaurants with friends that they are watching what you're getting and may get what you get or maybe avoid what you get? I don't know.
It depends. Sometimes yes. Sometimes yes. If they're close friends and they know me, they probably won't. But people that know I'm a dietitian, usually it's like, I think Megan said it earlier, like one of the first things is, oh, I don't want to tell you what I had for breakfast today. And it's like, it's okay. Like I'm a normal person too. We all eat stuff that's maybe not so good sometimes, and that's okay. Yeah.
So if you were interpreting a question to mean what is your favorite restaurant, then what is it, right? So you can go ahead and share with our viewers. What is your very favorite restaurant?
Oh gosh.
In the world. And it can be fast food. Nobody will judge you. It's whatever you're thinking right now.
I don't even know how to pick. I just love sushi in general, so that's one of my faves. In town, I like Blue a lot. And we tend to go to Rusty Taco quite a bit too.
And sushi's okay?
Oh yeah. Sushi's great.
So glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Megan, what about you?
You know, we were talking about this today. I'm like, I love the food scene in Omaha, and anybody new that like moves here, I'm always like, oh, you got to try this restaurant and this restaurant and this restaurant. I mean, I'll be really honest, if my pocketbook would allow, I would probably go to a new restaurant every week in this city if I could, because we have such a good food scene.
We do.
But my ultimate choice, if I was really like no monetary restrictions, is the Boiler Room. I just love the Boiler Room. It's a very simple menu, but so elevated, and you never walk out of there dissatisfied, or at least I have never walked out of there dissatisfied.
I just want our viewers to know we are not advertising anything here. I'm simply asking registered dietitians what their favorite restaurants are in case we want to follow your lead, right? Yes. Talking to Heather Miller and Megan Hall today about ultra-processed foods. Now, folks wanting more information can go to any of these websites, nutrition services at Hy-Vee.com, extension.unl.edu, or truefood.tech. I want to thank you both for being here and sharing your time, expertise, and your good sense of humor.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us on.
You bet. Thank our students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and all of you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television in the School of Communication. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call the UNO School of Communication at 402-554-2600 during regular business hours. Or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
And it also doesn't happen alone. The University of Nebraska at Omaha ensures that every student can earn their degree. We will work to reduce barriers and be a champion for affordability, accessibility, and develop engaging programs, as well as support systems. Visit unomaha.edu to learn more.
Coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Faded grass to a full.